All right, so now that we've gone over the vocabulary, we're going to start by reading our lesson today. Again, you guys can get on the episode, and I will post that again how to get on the episode. So I'm going to read along. If you want to start, guys can follow along in the article if you want to. You can touch point read with me as I read. Earth is home to a huge variety of animals, from giant rhinos to tiny winged insects. But more than 8,000 species are endangered and could become extinct. Those two vocabulary words, remember, endangered means not very many animals, extinct means all gone. Unfortunately, humans are their biggest problem. People hunt animals for food and body parts and destroy their habitats to build roads, farms, and homes. If you think about it, where the city of Cincinnati is today and where a lot of our homes are, used to be just forested area where deer, foxes, possums, where all those kinds of animals lived. Over time, we've cut down those trees and built houses, meaning that the animals that used to live there have lost their habitat or their homes. The good news is many people are also trying to help animals. They're moving them to protected areas, breeding them, and bringing back their habitats. Read on to meet 5 animals that people have rescued from almost dying out. With a little help from humans, these endangered populations have bounced back. The first animal that we're going to read about right here is the New Forest burnet. This red speckled moth, called the New Forest burnet, once fluttered around several areas of Great Britain, but over decades, people built cities and roads on their habitat. Many were also plucked from the wild by insect collectors. By the late 1980s, British scientists feared the moths were gone. Then researchers found 12 New Forest burnets in a patch of grass along a seaside cliff. They were the last of their kind known to exist on the island of Great Britain. The moths laid eggs in tall grass, but sheep had eaten the grass near the cliff, making it hard for them to reproduce. After the moths were found, scientists built a fence to keep the sheep out. As the grass grew, the moth population swelled to the thousands. So here we have this moth, and it's in Great Britain, which is in England. And they found out that these moths were being eaten by sheep that nearly disappeared. So in this case, people did help out by they built a fence. The scientists built a fence around to keep the sheep out. As the grass grew, the moth population swelled to the thousands. So I'm going to keep this highlighted because this might be a way that if a question is asked later on about how are these animals helped or how did they come back from being endangered, this would be an answer for this, okay? All right, next we're going to read about the Florida manatee. These days, when boaters enter Kings Bay in western Florida, they have to reduce their speed. Slowing down makes them less likely to hit a manatee. These pudgy marine mammals swim in coastal waters around the southeastern U.S. Hunting manatees was outlawed in the 1890s. Still, by the 1970s, there were fewer than 800 left. Boats were a big part of the problem. Their spinning propellers could injure or kill a slow-moving manatee. But new speed limits in the waters where manatees gather have helped the animal avoid collisions, says Jim Villad of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The most recent count found more than 8,800 Florida manatees. So again, this is another animal that was helped by humans. Humans were hurting it because they were driving too fast in their boats, and it was the blades of a boat were hitting. You think of them like a knife or spinning, and they were hitting the manatees and killing the manatees. They've made boats go slower. The propellers kind of looks like a fan. Those propellers have to go slower now, so they are not hurting the manatees like they were before. So where these manatees are being helped out as new speed limits in waters where manatees gather have helped the animals avoid collisions. And that's the way that the manatees are being helped. We go on to our next page, and we're going to see the blue iguana right here. A blue iguana is a reptile. You can see its skin, how it has those scales on its skin, and see the egg, how the egg, it kind of looks almost like a dry egg. Those are eggs that are laid by reptiles. Blue iguanas live in just one place, the island of Grand Cayman in the Caribbean. Over the past several decades, people paved over much of their habitat. They also brought pet cats and dogs, which hunt the reptiles. Blue iguana numbers plummeted. So in 1990, scientists with the Blue Iguana Recovery Program began capturing wild iguanas and breeding them in captivity. They kept the iguanas' eggs warm to help them hatch. Scientists raised the babies until they were mature. Then they released the iguanas into protected parts of the island. Today, an estimated 750 blue iguanas roam Grand Cayman Island. That's up from just 25 of the reptiles in 2000. So how did they help the blue iguanas, humans? They kept the iguanas. They started a Blue Iguana Recovery Program, began capturing wild iguanas and breeding them in captivity. So that's one way that humans helped this animal come back was they took some that were in the wild and they took them into like a recovery center or like a mini zoo, and they had the iguanas mate with each other, a male and a female mate, to produce eggs that they then were able to hatch and keep and able to have the babies survive. Then they re-released them into wild to help the numbers in the wild. Now we're going to read about the bald eagle. Bald eagles are the national symbol of the United States, but in the 1960s, they nearly became extinct across much of the country. The main culprit was DDT, a chemical that farmers use to kill pests on crops. When eagles ate animals that had eaten DDT, the chemical weakened their eggshells. As a result, their chicks didn't survive. The population was in free fall, says Brian Watts, a bird biologist in West Virginia. In 1963, only 487 eagle pairs were nesting in the continental US. After DDT was banned in 1972, bald eagles slowly started to recover. Now scientists think more than 10,000 pairs nest in trees from California to Florida to Maine. So with the bald eagles, crops were being sprayed with something called DDT. It's a chemical that was killing, um, it was a chemical that farmers used to kill ants or other bugs that would eat their crops. What happened was the bald eagles would eat those insects. And then when the bald eagles laid eggs, because they ate those insects that had that chemical on them, it would make the bald eagles' eggs that they laid too thin. And the baby eagles inside the eggs would die. So what they decided to do was ban farmers from using DDT. So they are no longer allowed to use DDT on their crops. And that helped the bald eagles survive. Southern white rhino. So we're going to go up here and we're going to say that the US, the DDT was banned. Okay. Okay, southern white rhino. Southern white rhinos live in southern Africa, but by the early 1900s, people had killed all but 100 of them. Hunting them is now illegal, but poachers still kill rhinos for their horns, which are used in some traditional medicines. The closer rhinos live to people, the more at risk they are. That's why 60 years ago, conservation groups began moving the animals to remote and protected areas in countries like Botswana and Zambia. Often, scientists first remove the rhino's horns to prevent them from being targeted by poachers. They use medicine to calm the rhinos before transporting them by helicopter or trucks. Thanks to these efforts, there are 18,000 of the animals today. They are the only rhino species not at risk of extinction. So the workers, if you see here, have actually removed the horn from these rhinos because I think if they remove them, then the hunters won't go after them and kill them for the horns. These horns are valuable because of the materials they're made from. They also made rhino hunting illegal, but people still do hunt them even though it's illegal. So what they've done is they've moved the animals to a more protected area where they can be watched. So if we want to highlight here how scientists have helped, conservation groups began moving the animals to remote and protected areas. Okay, That's our reading for this. And then I'm going to post this to our Google Classroom and on YouTube. And then if you guys can, I'm going to put a form on Google Classroom for you to answer some questions based on what we just read.